Last week, James Gunn took to Threads to confirm which DCU projects are actually in production. Stick around to hear his full thoughts as well as what this means for the rest of the DCU moving forward. I'm Brendan Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's get into the news. So to start things off here, I've actually got the thread from James Gunn in response to a fan asking, is Paradise Lost, the Wonder Woman adjacent series, still in production? James Gunn says, nothing is in production unless it's been greenlit. Right now that's Superman, Supergirl, Penguin, Peacemaker, Lanterns, and a handful of animated projects. But Paradise Lost, like many other titles known and unknown, is still in very active development. It will be in production once we have a script or scripts we think are great and ready to shoot, never before. As an aside, we aren't officially cast on anything that isn't greenlit. So while this statement obviously makes perfect sense, it is a little confusing to me. I had sort of assumed when the DCU Chapter 1 slate was announced, I had assumed that that meant that all of those projects were already greenlit. I had assumed that that meant that they were obviously still in the very early stages of pre-production, obviously in the early stages of development, not even yet in pre-production for a lot of these. The stories had as of yet still needed to be worked. The stories had at the time still needed to be worked out, but all of the upcoming slate was confirmed. I had assumed that when James Gunn was figuring out his overarching plan, that he had discussed this with the people at Warner Brothers and with the higher ups at Max and at HBO to determine what was actually going to happen moving forward. Now, following the news, however, recently that that the Green Lantern series Lanterns had been greenlit, I should have assumed that this was the state of things moving forward, that all of the projects still had to be confirmed. And yet this was still a little bit shocking to me. I don't necessarily know why you would announce an entire slate before having any of the projects greenlit. Now, of course, greenlit, it would be, we've got this base idea, now we present it to the executives, and then we decide to move forward or not. I don't understand why you would announce a slate if there is still the possibility that these shows, that these movies might not yet be moving forward. It seems a little bit weird to me that you would announce all of these things. I think we've got like 5 movies and 5 series. We've got 10 upcoming projects. Why would you announce that this is the slate if there's still the possibility that things could get canned moving down the line, right? When Paradise Lost was, we're just using that as an example because that was the impetus for the question here. When that was announced, that was something that got me really, really interesting. You know, it was sort of described as a Game of Thrones-esque intrigue series based on the island of Themyscira. And that is something that sounds really, really cool to me. Now, granted, we haven't had any news about that since its announcement, and so it's sort of drifted into the back of my consciousness. It's not something that I often think about. I'm more focused on the things that we get constant news for, like Superman or Lanterns, which constant news is not quite an accurate description, but we're still getting news. We're actively learning things about that series. And so because of that, Paradise Lost has sort of, fallen on the back end. And yet that was something that I was really, really excited for. And so it seems weird to me that we would announce that and build hype for it while there's still the possibility that the show could be canceled. Because that would suck. That would be the worst, to get this series to have the announcement of this series and have it to be something that sounds really cool and have it to be something that interests us, interests the fan base, approaches these stories and these characters from a different angle, something that we're not quite familiar with, and to build the hype and then ultimately have the rug pulled out from under us. So that is a little bit weird. Now, it is interesting to me, the examples as to what James Gunn gives as to what is currently in production. Obviously, we know Superman, Penguin, and Peacemaker, and Lanterns as well. We all know that those are currently moving forward. We've had more news about them. But the one example that he gives that sort of surprised me a little bit was Supergirl. when he says in production, I'm curious as to how far along he means in production. Obviously, we're not at a filming stage. They haven't even announced any of the cast outside of House of the Dragon's Millie Alcock. I can never remember if it's Millie or Missy. You know, the amount of times we've discussed this, and every time we have, I've said I can never remember. You would think it would stick into my brain, but as of yet, I'm still fumbling for the name. And it's, you know, I really liked her too, so it's definitely really irritating that I can never remember it. It is Millie Alcock. Millie Alcock. Okay, Millie, not Missy. But I'm really interested to see what comes from her Supergirl movie. Obviously, where I was going with that originally is we don't have any information on that. We haven't heard pretty much anything. We know that it's being worked on by Anna Nogueira, but that was pretty much the last update that we had heard. There's been no news, no castings, nothing whatsoever. All of the focus has been on Superman. So it's interesting to me that he would include that movie in this list. How far along in production are we? Are we close enough, or are we far enough down the production line that in the coming months here, we're going to start seeing some leaks, some more information come out? I don't know. I hope so. Like I said, I'm really interested in seeing what they do with that movie. It's based off of the Tom King comic Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which I'm currently reading, and so far has held up to the hype that I've heard. You know, the artistry is absolutely beautiful. I'm not going to comment on the story right now, just because, as I've said, I'm still working my way through it. I think I'm 4 or 5 issues in. I'm about halfway through the comic, so before long, be expecting a video where we discuss everything we know about the upcoming Supergirl movie, and in that we'll be doing a deep dive into this comic around which the movie is allegedly based. But the art itself is absolutely phenomenal. It's filled with these massive splash pages, which, you know, I'm a huge fan of. I think it's incredibly well done, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to adapt it. So I'm definitely a little bit curious to know how far along we are in this. Like I said, it's a little weird to me that it's included in this list of in-production projects. I don't know. My sort of assumption here is mostly, I mean, and it's mostly based off of nothing other than my personal perception of James Gunn's personality, right? My guess is that maybe they had this, the studio was pushing him for a slate, and so he just announced everything all at once. But I think the studio is keeping it in the reason none of these were greenlit is because DC has sort of a, let's just say, a tumultuous past, right? The movies have been inconsistent, to say the least. The most recent outing of a connected universe, the DCEU, was not exactly received well, let's say, just to put it lightly. You know, there's some good ones in there, there's some good aspects, but by and large, the franchise itself has suffered. And I think because of that, perhaps the studio behind the superheroes is is hedging their bets, rather. Perhaps that they're going at this from the standpoint of, well, look, you know, we want you to sort of announce things and build up hype, but we want to sort of keep we want to keep one last trick up our sleeves. If you put forward something that we don't think is necessarily going to go over well, then we're going to can it. Which, again, is weird to me. The format where you would announce them and yet possibly have them be canceled later on is a little bit weird, but it does bode well in the sense that if an idea is put forth and the people around it don't necessarily believe that it's going to stand up to the level of quality that they want to pursue with this, ultimately, obviously, from the executive's standpoint, they're looking at this from a monetary view of, is this going to put butts in seats in the theater? Is this going to make money, or on the couch, as it were, for the series? I think that's a good place to be, especially for the DCU. I don't think you want to necessarily put something out that you don't think people are going to enjoy. So hopefully this means that down the line we're going to get better projects. Hopefully this means that they're cognizant of the sort of perception of DCU of the DC movies in the culture, and that is going to have a tangible impact on the movies that we see moving forward. Movies and series. I keep constantly only saying movies, but obviously this applies to any of the projects, whether they're the live action movies or series or the animated ones as well. Hopefully this is a sign that moving forward, they're going to be paying attention to what people want to see. And hopefully that means that we're going to be getting good projects down the line. Now, obviously, this puts the rest of the DCU in a bit of a weird state. Like I've mentioned earlier, this means that any one of these things that has been previously announced by James Gunn could as of yet be canceled still. None of this could happen. But I do want to quickly go over what is the current slate for the DCU's Chapter 1, also known as Gods and Monsters. So obviously we have Superman, which is going to be the introduction into this new universe, being released on July 11th, 2025. This is the first film, and I have such high hopes for this. I hope that they exceed my expectations. I hope that this truly ushers in a Man of Steel that we deserve. I hope that this brings the universe of these amazing stories and these amazing characters all the way to where they should be in the universe. Now, next along the slate, we obviously have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which we've addressed enough. I'm super excited for. Really excited to see Millie Alcock. We'll have a whole video breaking down the base story later on. Maybe not this week, but perhaps next week. But I'm really, really interested to hear about this. The next one we have is Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Now, it's weird to me that this one has yet not been greenlit. I don't see, obviously, I would assume that this one isn't going to be one of the projects that's going to be canceled. Batman is a staple of the DC universe. But it does mean that we might not get this version of the movie. We might not get the Brave and the Bold that follows Batman and Robin. We might not get a world or a movie that has a fully established Bat family. Ultimately, this could get changed. All of this could get changed. And so, this is a story that I'm not necessarily attached to. As interesting as I think it would be to see the relationship between a Bruce Wayne and a Damian Wayne, as exciting as I think that would be, if this were to be completely refigured, if this were to be altered in such a way that it isn't, the Bat family story, it doesn't follow Damian Wayne's Robin, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I always thought it was sort of weird that we were jumping into this universe with a Batman who, again, presumably has a whole Bat family. But even if he doesn't, I thought it would be weird if the first Robin in the movie universe is the most recent Robin in the comics. While I think it makes for an interesting story, the origin of Damian Wayne as Robin is really interesting, and they have such good chemistry, Bruce and Damian do. It's so fascinating to see them work together. If this were one that were ultimately shifted around, I would not be opposed to it. We also have the Swamp Thing movie. This is one that I think I'm really, really excited to see. If there's going to be a movie that's not going to happen, I assume it would be this one, the Swamp Thing, just because of how different it appears from everything else. But, that being said, this is one of the only ones that very directly plays into that Gods and Monsters subtitle for Chapter 1 of the DC Universe. So maybe this is one that James Gunn would really heavily lobby for. Presumably when they decided to do this story, they did it in a way, or they brought it forth in a way that would make it tie into the broader story. Again, since this is the only one that directly plays on the subtitle for the chapter, I would think that maybe this is one that they would try extra hard to put forth their current understanding or their current vision for the project. But obviously, it's all up in the air. And then the final movie that was announced is The Authority, which is a bit of an anti-hero team. This is one that for some reason, it doesn't strike me that this would be one that would get canceled. This would be one that wouldn't be greenlit. I foresee this ultimately happening. For whatever reason, this does not strike me as one that they would choose to not continue with. It strikes such a different tone from presumably what we will be seeing in Superman and what we would likely be seeing in a future Justice League ensemble movie. I think tonally this one is different enough that they would like to continue it, right? Like, as I said, the Authority is an anti-hero team. These are people who, as it says right here, take matters into their own hands to do what they believe is right. Whether that means killing people, destroying heads of state, changing governments, whatever they want to do to make the world better. And so I think this strikes me as one that seems safe. Like I said, it's very tonally different. It approaches presumably different themes than we'll be exploring in some of the other movies, some of the ensemble movies. And so I guess I'm kind of interested in what they do with this one ultimately moving forward. And then we have the DC TV shows, Paradise Lost, as directly mentioned in the threads. This was the question to which James Gunn responded. Again, considering we have no Wonder Woman story yet announced, it seems highly unlikely to me that this wouldn't be moving forward, at least in some capacity. But with Batman the Brave and the Bold, I have the same mindset of, while this is probably going to move forward, maybe it's going to move forward in a different way than it was previously pitched, right? As it says here, it's going to be a Game of Thrones-ish story about Themyscira, the home of the Amazons and the birthplace of Wonder Woman. This drama is really about the political intrigue behind the society of all women. How did that come about? So I think that this is likely going to happen. This doesn't strike me as one that is going to be canceled. But again, they're probably going to go a different direction with this. Maybe they're not going to go with the Game of Thrones-esque story. Maybe they'll go the traditional superhero route and just sort of have Wonder Woman be slightly removed or what have you. And maybe the ultimate end product that we get from this series is that, it's billed as sort of Wonder Woman adjacent. She's not directly mentioned. It's not even clear where this takes place in the timeline. So maybe ultimately the finished project is going to transition to a Wonder Woman-centric story, which again is something else that I would be in favor for, right? Wonder Woman is one of the DC Trinity. She's one of the most important heroes. She's incredibly powerful. She has such an interesting story. There's so many different avenues to take the character. So I think this is definitely going to move forward at some point, but how it moves forward, I'm not entirely sure. Next up, we also have Booster Gold, which is this is one that I think if anything's going to get canceled, it's going to be this one, just because it's a hero that not many people know about. It's a hero that even the people who know about don't necessarily care about all that much. It's relatively obscure. And so I think this is likely one that is potentially on the chopping block. My assumption is that this is going to be a James Gunn passion project. This is something that he really enjoys. This is a character whom he is going to heavily lobby for. So I don't know how likely it is that it will ultimately be canceled. But if it were, I wouldn't be all that surprised. There's been recent I think it's rumors, I don't know if it's been officially reported, that Kumail Nanjiani is going to be taking over the lead character of Booster Gold, and he's going to be this time-traveling hero, in quotes. I don't know. I mean, if that's true, it's probably going to be funny. I don't really necessarily know anything about Kamal Nanjiani. The only thing I've seen him in is The Eternals, in which I thought he did fine. You know, he suffers from a bad plot, bad writing, bad direction, and just a terrible movie in general, so it's a little bit hard to tell. I know that my dad has said that he is funny, based off of whatever show he is in. I honestly don't care about this one. So thematically, this makes the most sense as to one to be on the chopping block, but like I said, I would assume it's a James Gunn passion project, and so there's a good chance that it's ultimately safe. Next up, we also have Creature Commandos. So this is an animated series that is actually going to be releasing at the end of this year in December of 24. So while Superman is the first live-action DC movie that we'll be getting, Creature Commandos is actually the first DCU project that we'll be seeing in any capacity. This is another one that I'm not 100% interested in. I'm sure I'll watch it. It's only 7 episodes. And I'm interested in the fact that I know that they've said that all of the characters who will be doing the voice work in the animation will also be reprising their roles in live action, which I think is really fun. Next up, we also have the Waller series. This is one that is not in any this is not in any danger of being canceled. This will absolutely be moving forward. Obviously, there's no actual news regarding it, but if this got canceled, I would be incredibly surprised. This is clearly a character who James Gunn is a massive fan of. We got her in the first Suicide Squad and the second Suicide Squad, and I believe she's in the Peacemaker TV series as well. And so, this is clearly somebody whom James Gunn enjoys a lot. And so if her show got canceled, I would be blown off my feet. I would be incredibly surprised. And finally, we have the Lanterns TV series. We've obviously talked here a lot about how excited we are for this. We'll be having another episode later on. Again, perhaps not this week, maybe in the next week, where we go over everything we know. I've been reading a lot of Lanterns comics, a lot of I've read the New 52 Green Lantern Corps series, and I just recently finished The Blackest Night. So I've got a lot of ideas as to how this could possibly move forward and tie into the larger DCU. As James Gunn has said that this series is going to be the thing which ties in the broader theme of this chapter 1 of Gods and Monsters. And so I'm really, really interested to see what is moving forth. Let me know down below, what are you guys most excited for in this DCU lineup? What do you think is most likely to get chopped off? As I said, I think personally, of what has been released thus far, the one that is most likely to not be greenlit is Booster Gold. However, I think a lot of these things are sort of going to be altered moving forward. I don't think we're going to be seeing the original vision of James Gunn once these are all put forward to the screen. But let me know down below. We'll make sure that you like and subscribe for more nerd content, and we'll be back here tomorrow with a brand new news segment, and I will see you guys then.